Hi everyone, my name is Don Peterson, and this is my Lessons from the Library series. Today's choice of books is Jack Nicklaus's Golf My Way with Ken Bowden. As a teenager, this was one of the first books that I picked up and tried to learn golf from. And Nicklaus titled this book Golf My Way because it's how he plays golf, not necessarily how you should. But I found a lot of lessons in here that helped me. So let's dig in and see what we can find in here that can help you. Okay, so you can see I've got a lot of things I want to go over in Jack's book, so let's get started. I want to talk about the grip. Nicklaus had small hands, so there's a couple different grips, and he tried a lot when he was younger. He said he tried the full finger grip, he called it, which is a baseball grip, or maybe 10 finger grip, some people call it. So he tried that. He tried overlapping, which is like the Bowden grip, and he felt like his hands came apart at the top of the swing, so he went away from both of those grips. Although he did try both of them. And he stuck with the interlocking grip. He said since he had small hands, it made his hands feel like they were together. The other thing he mentioned I thought was very key was that he didn't feel like he used his hands much. He didn't feel like the release happened, so there was nothing there that he had to do with his hands. He just wanted something, felt like he was hanging on to it because he didn't feel like his hands were very strong, so he felt like he got his power from his hips and his legs and his body, he said. So I thought that was a very interesting point. I want to read exactly what Jack said here. Historically, big hands have been considered an asset in golf, but he had small hands. So he said, perhaps that's because I motivate the club primarily with my legs and body rather than my hands and wrists. So there you go. That's Nicklaus talking about how he used his body, his core, his structural muscles, obviously the bigger muscles in his body, and he didn't rely on hand speed or hand snapping or wrist snapping or the hands to square the club face, things like that. One other thing I think that's a little bit controversial, I hear a lot of amateurs come in and they think that the interlocking grip is the #1 grip, that most pros use an interlocking grip. Now it's true that two of the best players who ever played the game, Nicklaus and Tiger Woods, interlocked, but the majority of the tour players overlap, and that was true back in Jack's day. He said that in his book. He said the majority of people that play on tour use an overlapping or a Bowden grip, and he was one of the few back then that used interlocking. I think the same is true today. So one of the things Jack Nicklaus was known so well for was his ability to concentrate, and he was considered one of the great thinkers in the game. And there's a couple paragraphs in chapter 2 here about going to the movies, and Jack said that he tried to picture how the shot was going to land when he first got to the tee or to his ball in the fairway, how the ball was going to land on the green, what type of shot he wanted to have to go into the green, whether it's a fade or a draw, high or low. He pictured even how the ball was going to stop, and then he would go backwards and think, okay, well now how do I make a swing to create the shot that I have pictured in my brain? And he talked about it being in full color. I thought that was interesting. And then he did this all before he even pulled a club out of his bag. So he also mentioned that he thought it was one of the biggest things he noticed with amateurs when they go out to play. Most amateurs grab a club out of their bag, they're setting up and they're swinging before they've even thought about the shot. So I think most of you recognize when you watch tour players on TV, they're very thoughtful right before they hit a shot. They're really thinking and visualizing. So visualizing your shot, pre-shot routine, all of that, Jack called going to the movies. So maybe you can incorporate this into your golf game as well. This next part is something that stands out to me because it's something that I talk about quite a bit. And you see a lot of differences in teaching from today versus 30 years ago or 20 years or 10 years ago. And he talked about keeping his trail knee flexed and how he did it. And he found that it was important to keep his weight on the inside of his right leg or right foot. If he could anchor the inside of his right foot, then his right knee, and Jack was a right-handed golfer, so trail knee, his right knee would stay flexed during the backswing, and that helped him keep his head stable. He was very keen on keeping his head stable and in the same spot, and he found that if he could keep his trail knee flexed, then that kept him from bobbing up and down. And I think that was one of his big problems during his career. His head wanted to go down a little bit during the backswing and then come up during the downswing. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And today's teachers, a lot of people are teaching us that it's okay to straighten the trail knee to create a bigger backswing or a bigger hip turn. While Jack was adamant about not moving it too much and staying flexed. I think that's because he used his legs for power, and he could control, and he also had a nice, pretty flexible hip and shoulder turn. Although he talked about later on, I think that was one of my next tabs, but he talked about how his shoulders and his hips turned quite a bit in order to get his full backswing. So this is one of the things that I thought was the most interesting when I was reviewing Jack's book was he talked about swing thoughts or swing keys. And I was surprised to read this one paragraph where he talked about, he actually had 6 keys. He had 6 things that he was thinking about. And he said, I found that when I concentrated best, I could work through all of my swing keys. And he played golf that way. He played major tournaments that way. This wasn't what he did in practice. He actually played major tournaments where he had 6 swing thoughts going on. He did mention that sometimes it was only 2 or 3, and he thought that most amateurs should probably stick with just 1 or 2 swing thoughts. But he was able to concentrate well enough to mentally check through 6 swing thoughts. Now, there's a big controversy on social media about playing golf versus playing golf swing. And I think that's pretty interesting. You look at the greatest player, a lot of people think Jack was the greatest player of all time, and he had a very good golf swing, and he could hit very good golf shots. He was one of the best ball strikers, I think, of all time. Very powerful. But he had actually swing keys or mental thoughts keying on mechanics of the golf swing. So kind of interesting. I think there's a lot of other golfers that used swing keys that were mechanical thoughts to help them through, maybe they got into poor swing habits for a while and they were working their way back. So these swing keys helped them stop making errors that maybe they made in the past. So there's a lot to be said for that, and a lot of controversy. So take that with a grain of salt. This is another one that's really stood out to me. Was Jack's got a section in here about the hips must turn. And I'll read the first part. It says, I understand there's a theory in golf today that the hips shouldn't turn on the backswing. And this book was written many, many years ago. And the same is kind of true today. There's a lot of teachers that talk about restricting the hips, and a big shoulder turn against a minimal hip turn gives you more power. Where Jack felt like, in fact he even says, it's hogwash, and here's why. So he wanted to explain that, in order to make a nice full shoulder turn, the hips have to turn. And I find that this is very important with most students that I train. There's very few people that are flexible enough to make a really big, deep shoulder turn and hold their hips fairly still, which doesn't make any sense because then you're winding up and putting the pressure on the lower part of your back. I think if you put the pressure into your hip rather than into your lower spine, that's going to be better for you. So I would agree with Jack on how he used his hips, and he keyed a lot on his hips during his golf swing. I think that's very important. All right, the last tab here is something else that really stuck out to me because I believe so much in this. He wrote a little section about at-home practice. So Jack always worked in front of a mirror. He said he checked his positions, and he was able to discover different things about his golf swing by working on his golf swing at home without hitting golf balls. The other thing he talked about is you can putt into a cup, you can chip into a net. He goes, the possibilities of practice in home are endless. So there you go. Best player who ever played the game. Tinkered a lot with his swing and learned shots just by chipping and pitching around the house and putting into a cup. So for those of you who are interested more in in-home training, check out my Miyagi for Golf program on swingfactory.com. That's the book, Jack Nicklaus, Golf My Way. and I hope you enjoyed my review. And if you want a copy of this book, obviously you can click the link below and then it'll take you to Amazon. You can pick up a copy there. Thanks.